That's right, everybody. It is time for yet another installment of the Patch Party. I'm Rob Appell. Block number 7's up on the wall. Let's get started. That's right, everybody. Welcome back to Making It Fun. I am your host, Rob Appell from Michael Miller Fabrics, and I'm super excited to see you. Can you believe it? We are all the way to month number 7 in this awesome Patch Party block of the month. And again, we're still learning great things together. Super fun. Today's block, as you can see up on the wall, is super simple. It's going to make a really fun star, but I've actually got a little trick that I think maybe will be new to a lot of you, and I think you'll dig this for lining up your squares and your triangles. Before we dive into the tutorial though, and we'll try to not drag this one out. You know me, I love to chit chat, but I know you want to see how the project looks. I just want to thank Leila again for this fabulous patch party, our awesome pattern that she's created. Make sure you're checking her out. Make sure you're giving her a bunch of love on social media. You can get the pattern from her. All of the information is down below. Of course, you can also get it in a lot of your favorite local quilt shops and some online retailers out there. And you know me, we are using the Michael Miller Fabrics. Each of the blocks, or at least I should say most all of the blocks, feature 2 different fabrics in a colorway. So we're using our yellows today. We have Fairy Frost and we have Cotton Couture, and just gorgeous, super fun the way this works. And then our background is our bright white. So it may be a little hard to see there, but once it hits the design board, super, super simple. So you know, to protect the designer herself, I won't be mentioning sizes. You need to purchase the pattern. That's how we support our artists out there. And so once you have your pattern, you'll know the sizes to follow along. Like I said, this is called Bright Star. I love the name. I love the color. And we're going to dive right in right now, following the instructions as we go. Make sure the iron is as hot as I am feeling right now. Am I coming on strong? Maybe a little bit. Anyways, we've got squares, we've got triangles to work with today. All of your cutting instructions is in the info as well. We're going to start with our larger squares. We're going to start with our solid colors. We're going to need 4 per block, and we are making 2 of these blocks. If you've watched the other videos, you've learned that most of these blocks in this particular project are 2. Sometimes you'll do 4 and the instructions are very clear, and just follow the cutting and you'll end up with exactly what you need. So I've taken my 4 squares for the block we're going to create together. The other one's on the wall. So you started with 8 and I feel like I'm rambling on again. We have drawn diagonal lines on the back side or the wrong side of all of our solids here. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to line these up to do what's like a magic flying geese. This is a super cool technique. We learned it a few blocks back, and super fun and easy to work with, but it's pretty cool. And I've been doing it more and more, and I really, really like the results. So I've laid one of the squares, the smaller squares, on the largest of our squares for today. And just make sure that your diagonal line is start pointing through here, not running from the edge to the edge. We're running through the center. And I'm going to take a second square and I'm going to let that sit right on top, and I'm lining my outside edges up, not worrying about the extra thread. I'm lining up that diagonal line, and then Leila recommends we slide a straight pin in here. I've gotten in the habit of breaking the rules a little bit and not putting a straight pin in here, so let me show you that trick. But not to say that a pin's a bad idea. In that case, put a pin here, but don't put a pin under the feed dogs. We don't want to stitch over it. So as we come over here to our 1/4 inch seam allowance, I'm going to lift my presser foot because I have the edge guide. And then as I lower the presser foot, it's on the other side of this little line, which is going to make just a slightly less than 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is what we want. Or a 1/4 inch maybe is what I should really say. And I'm going to stitch on through here. And then as I approach this next square, I just want to make sure that everything is still aligned and calibrated along the outside edges. I might need to lift my presser foot. And again, if you do not have the edge guide, that wouldn't have been in your way. But the edge guide's wonderful, and we've been using it all along, so we want to keep using it if you have been. Let's stitch all through here. We're just going to cut the threads and lift the presser foot. And before we do anything, I'm just going to go ahead and swing this right back around. Drop the presser foot again on the other side. Make sure that I'm getting a good pickup on that corner. And away we go. 2 rows of stitching, 1 on either side. So that's our 1/4 inch guide. We are not sewing on that line. All the way through. Cut your threads again. Okay, and now as I bring it out of the machine, again, 2 rows of stitching here, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna use my ruler to keep my hands nice and safe. I'm cutting edge to edge all the way through here, like yay, as you can see, and we are now working on 2 different sections. I'm gonna go ahead and press these, and as much as I'd like to press away from our white fabric, I'm gonna actually press into the yellow. It just makes life so much easier with these magic flying geese. Folding it over. It kind of looks like a little bandit, the beginning of a bandit, if you ask me. Why does everything look like a little animal face in my head? Maybe it's because I love pets so much, who knows? Okay, now we've done this to both of these. And we're going to go ahead, I'm going to show you here, obviously you'll do the same for both. I'm going to now lay the other square with the diagonal line across here, and yes, we're just going to sew on both sides of this again, very simply. Sew all the way through one side, cut that thread, spin the fabric, come back around and start all over. Okay, now that we have those made, we're going to go ahead and, again, same exact process. We're going to use our ruler to keep our hands safe. We're going to cut down the line we drew originally. And now we have basically created, yes, because I finished the other one when you weren't looking, 4 sets of flying geese that just need to be pressed and trimmed one last time. So let me show you how that's done. Again, pressing away from the white into the yellow here. Working nicely. And you can see how quickly you were able to create these 4 awesome flying geese blocks. And again, we just want to go ahead and make sure that things are a little easier and cleaner to sew through, lining up points and stuff. So I just like to take off these little dog ear corners right now. Probably should use a ruler or slow down. Obviously, I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at what I'm doing because I don't want to hurt myself. And as I trim these, I'm going to set these 4 aside. These are actually the outside parts here that we're going to build. But I just want to go ahead, like I said, we're following our pattern and making sure that everything is prepped as we go. The next few steps are going to basically be the same steps as we work our way around the center of the star. And I stalled just long enough to go ahead and teach you how to do that. So with that said, we are going to go to our smallest of our squares. Here it's a solid again, and we're going to start to sew on these really small triangles. These triangles are going to line up on all 4 sides here. So that's our first color union. That's our first bank. One of the things, whether you're new or not to quilt making, this is a challenge because look, as I pull these away, you can see that's going to be kind of fit, like it doesn't seem like it fits, so to speak. So one of the things I like to do is I like to take, this is that trick I was telling you about, by the way. I like to take my square to begin with, and I'm just going to real quickly press it kind of in half like this. And one more time, real brief. I don't want to press it too much. I'm just creating little marking lines. So again, I'm going to hit it here. And now hopefully you can see I've got 4 little lines that actually denote where the center of that square is. And you know where the center of this is. So technically I can press this triangle also to do the same thing, right? You can even just finger press it if you wanted to, but you can also simply make sure you're going right sides together. And as I lay this here, now the tip is on the line on the other side. So very easy to find that. Once you found center on both your square and your triangle, then you can just wander on over to the sewing machine with that 1/4 inch seam allowance and begin stitching. And I like to stitch out off that corner, make sure I'm catching everything. You can't always see where that square starts. So we're just going to do now opposite sides, okay? So if I've done this side, now I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. So I might want to fold that back so I can find where that center lines up on that center tip of the triangle, scoot it back ever so gently. See how that works? That's really a cool trick if you ask me. So then you go ahead and let that fold back over if you need. Come on over to the sewing machine, pretty dang centered, and do yourself another 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to work kind of like Noah, 2 at a time, right? As we load up our arc. So we're just going to pressing into the triangles each time away from center. I'm just letting my iron float over. And just like before on those flying geese, I want to take a moment and trim off the excess so that I don't create a bunch of bulk in those corners, because that's going to make it a little bit more challenging later on when it's time to quilt through it. And I hope you all are planning to quilt your own quilts. Okay, so now we're here. We're just going to go right back to where we were. Just don't get going so fast that you forget to go right sides together, checking where everything is. There's my center point. There's my outside edge. And I'm going to do this side and then the other side. And just like before, we're going to go ahead and we're just going to press out and prepare to trim back down. So pressing out. But now, instead of just winging it or freestyling it, we are actually dealing back with a square again. So it's actually a really good idea to make sure everything is staying square by watching your lines on your ruler as you get ready to trim. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that all the way down like this, and I'm going to work my way around the block as I do the same. Just making sure I get rid of those extra long little tips. But making sure I'm using the other lines on the ruler to make sure that everything is staying square and accurate. And we have basically now created the center run on our Bright Star block number 7 patch party, okay? We're going to work in a rotation. I'm going to speed things up a little bit so that we can get to how we install our outside flying geese. Remember, you're going solid print, so next is the solids again, and we're just going to work them on just the same as we did before, sewing one and then the other. Now as I lay this back over, I can still see where center is going to go, but this time, because I'm back on point or on the diagonal of my yellow center square, my solid center square, you can see this is now just pointing right over here at center. So we're just going to now use the other corners as our visual markers and begin tacking these down forever with, not tacking, permanently installing these with our 1/4 inch seam allowance. I was telling jokes and I messed it up. Start over, Rob. Start over. Okay, here we go. 1/4 inch seam allowance. After you have your 4th triangle put on of the solids, you're going to do the same exact thing. You're going to press it open and prepare to trim it down. Okay, so just make sure you've got a nice flat surface to work on. Checking everything, making sure it's as square as possible before you start that first trim. And away you go. Keeping up with that same rotation from solid to print to solid, you have more of your print triangles left on the table, and that's right, just go ahead and prepare to install those the exact same way as we did the first 2 rounds, and we will be done with our center. So as I flop over my first point, I'm just looking again, making sure it follows all the way across, but I still, again, have another center line. I can just barely see that crease I made with the iron the first time, so I can use either of those markers as I get ready to sew this triangle to this outside edge here. There's another tip for accuracy I'd really like to talk about real quick, and that is feeling with your finger that area where the seam allowances come together, and you can find that and you can make sure you hit just that tip with your needle as you sew on by, and that'll help that open up and keep your star points really crisp. Okay, we have the last triangle on the center now. All of our threads cut. Let's hit the iron real quick. And take a moment to trim some of this down again. And I'll tell you, it's not perfect on those points. Certainly keep you warm on a cold winter's night, and it looks pretty dang good, if you ask me. Okay. And like I said, we just want to make sure everything was trimmed, squared up pretty nicely at this point because you've completed your center. And now we're going to go back in and we're just going to start to add in our outer edges. So this is the way we'll build it with our flying geese, the yellows pointing into the yellow. And then you also had a few of these squares laying about. So we're going to get to those. Those are called cornerstones if you're new to quilt lingo. Okay, so we start always with our short stuff. So we're going to line up these points here. We're going to flop this over and head back to the machine. So we're going to put these short units together first before we add in those cornerstones. Once you have both of the flying geese sides on, yellows in, we're going to come back to the ironing board, and right now we're going to press from our center out. So from the center of our block out into the flying geese on both sides, and that's going to really help for when we install our last two rows. And we're going to build those now as rows, right? We want to take our flying geese squares and our squares and stitch those to both sides. We can do that in a real jiff, and you can even do it chain piecing style. If you're working with real print fabrics, make sure you're going slow enough that you're not putting these together wrong. Make sure everything's right sides together is what I'm trying to say. But you're certainly welcome to chain piece this now. And because we're not crossing over any seams or anything, you can actually rotate and do it again. Just watch your alignment if you're not using our wonderful Michael Miller solids for this and you don't want to have anything go weird or upside down or wrong sides up or whatever. You know what I'm saying. And now that we have these outer rows built, remember we just pressed away from center. So now I'm going to press from my white square, the cornerstone, back into the flying geese unit. And this is going to make everything line up even more simply by having our seams nesting or going in opposite directions, if you haven't heard me talk about that before. As you bring it back to the design board, make sure you're putting it so that the orientation forms a star. And now that we have both of those pressed nice, we're just going to turn one over, lining up our, lining up our front tip first, but then making sure that next seam union down there nests with the seams should be smooth as silk or good cotton. And with that last outside row on, we are all done. Let me go ahead and press it for you so you can see how nice it's turned out here. But while I'm doing that, I do really think I should say thank you again to our awesome pattern designer, Leila. You know, like I said, her cutting instructions, her written instructions for how to piece it all together is fantastic. I have had no waste. I've had nothing but accuracy when creating this block or all of the blocks in the quilt so far. So this has been really, really fun. Of course, it's a 12 block of the month, and we are on block 7. So we've got several more installments of the patch party coming at you. And until then, I'll be working on some other great projects, so I'll probably see you in about a week right here at Making It Fun. Wow, you are still there. Thanks for sticking with me till the end of the video. I know, I get a little long-winded sometimes. But if you did enjoy today's video, make sure you check out a few of the other ones we've created. I think they're terrific. And of course, please subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the little bell to be notified. I don't want you to miss a moment of the fun. Stay safe and happy sewing.